This is Precalculus, AP Precalculus, homework 1-4, average rates of change. Let's go right in. The first thing that you see is that we have a function, and we're trying to find the average rate of change, which we're going to cross off. Average rate of change is really just asking for the slope for those points. Again, both this 0 and this 1 are x-coordinates and x-coordinates. You have x1 and x2. So what we needed to find is our y-coordinates in order to find slope. Because again, the definition of slope is it's the change in y over the change in x. We have the change in x. X changes by going up 1. We don't know what the change in y is, so we're going to find it right now. So if I'm being very formal about this, I'll say I'm going to first plug in 0. When I plug in 0 into this x and this x, I'm going to rewrite my equation as f of 0 is equal to -2 times 0 quantity squared plus 1. And then I'm just going to keep rewriting the right-hand side. The first thing that you do is exponents before multiplication. So 0 to the power of 2 is 0. And I'm going to have -2 times 0 plus 1. -2 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 1 is 1, which means f of 0 is 1. Which means when my input is 0, my output is 1. So this is my y1. Let me write this in a different color. My y1 is a 1. This is y1. Okay, how do I plug in the next point? When I plug in 1 to this x and this x, I'm going to rewrite this as, we'll do a whole another color here. This is going to be f of 1. When I plug in f of 1, I get -2 times the quantity of 1 and quantity squared plus 1. And this is going to be, again, 1 squared first, which is 1. So I'm going to have -2 times 1 plus 1. -2 times 1 is -2. -2 plus 1 is -1, which means my output is -1 for my y2. All right, so I have both x1, x2, y1, y2. I'm ready for slope. So you can be, if you're going careful, you can do this faster. If you want to be more careful, you can do an actual subtraction problem. For the purpose of this video, I have 16 problems to do, so I want to go as fast as possible. Let me show you my shortcut. I'm always going to go right to left unless there's some reason to not. How much did I have to change to go from 0 to 1? I changed by 1, which means my slope, which used to be, I'll write it out for us, maybe in a new color so I can see. My slope used to be the change in y over the change in x, which means I'm going to say the change in x in this case was 1. How much did I change in y? Well, I had to go from 0 down to -1, which means I had to go down to 0 and then down another -1. I changed -2, which means my final answer is -2. And this is the logic that I'm going to be doing over and over, but I could have done it a different way where I do a subtraction problem. I do this number minus this number, and I get a -1 down here, and I do this number minus a negative this number, and I get a +2 up here. A +2 divided by -1 is still a -2. There's a bunch of different ways of doing slope. I just choose the faster method because AP is all about how to do things as efficiently and as quickly as possible. All right, in number 2, I'm going to be doing the same thing, and I'm kind of doing a speed version of this. I'm plugging in both these x-coordinates. Here I go. I'm first going to plug in f of -2. When I do that, I get 2 times -2 quantity squared minus 2. Really quickly, -2 quantity squared is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 minus 2 is 6. So this is going to be, I'm just going to write this. This is equal to 6. What about f of 1? F of 1 is 2 times 1 quantity squared minus 2. Mental math, 1 squared is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. So this value is going to be 0. How much did I change with my y's? Again, I hope I'm not going too fast, but I am essentially working on slope, which is the change in y over the change in x. My change in y, how much did I change to go from this y coordinate to this y coordinate? Well, I had to go down 6, so it's going to be -6. How much did I change from this x coordinate to this x coordinate? Well, I had to go up 3. I had to go up to 0 and then up another 1, so I went up 3, so a +3. This is going to be over 3. -6 divided by 3 is -2. By the way, I should be checking my work, but it's kind of hard to flip back and forth. But both number 1 and number 2 are both -2. Let's check our work. Both 1 and 2 are both -2. I should be highlighting those in green. So come back over here, highlight in green, highlight in green. All right. In number 3, I'm going to be doing the same thing. We're going to go faster and faster, if that's okay with you guys. I'm going to say f of -1. F of -1 is going to be negative, and then in parentheses, -1 quantity squared plus 2. And then we have to be careful here with our mental math, but I will say it out loud. Negative squared is always going to be a positive. So this thing is going to be -1 times -1, which is +1. +1, make it negative, is now a -1. -1 plus 2 is a 1. All right. From here, I'm going to do another color, and this is going to be f of 2/3. -2/3, sorry. F of -2/3. It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive for this type of question, though, because it's going to be squared anyway. This is going to be negative, and then in parentheses, -2/3 n quantity squared plus 2. All right, be careful here. -2, I think I'm going to have to write this one out a little bit. Also, why did I not change the color? I can change the color really quickly by going like this, and I can go color, and I can go, I think, bluish. That it's not the right blue, but whatever. This one is going to be 4/9 inside of here, and then a negative, and then a +2. I'm rewriting this because sometimes people forget 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and that's how you square a fraction. From there, I'm going to make it negative, and then I somehow need to convert this 2 into something over 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this 2 by 9/9 to make the denominator 9. I'm going to erase this 2, and I'm going to change that to 18/9. When I finish doing all this math, I'm going to get 18 minus 4, which is 14/9, and I'm ready to go. All right, so again, I'm using slope, which is change in y over change in x, which means my slope up here is going to be the change in y. How much did y change? Well, y changed from 1 to 14/9, and this is a little bit hard to do in your head, so I'm going to go ahead and make this easier for you. I'm going to multiply this by 9/9, and this is really the same thing as 9/9. How much did I move to get from 9/9 to 14/9? Well, I had to move up 5/9. So my slope here is going to be 5/9 for the y, 5/9 for the y, and then how much did I change for the x's? I had to move from -1 to 2/3. I'm always moving from the left point to the right point, even if I'm going backwards. That's okay with me. And that is one of those cases where I'm actually moving to the right, so that's lucky me. All right. I'm not sure, so I'm going to switch out the 1 for a 3/2. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, this one, I'm going to cross you off and change you to a -3/3. Okay, I had to move from a -3 to a -2, which means I added 1, and specifically I added 1/3. So I went a positive 1/3. From there, I'm going to do a keep it, change it, flip it, and that's going to be keep it, change it, flip it, and notice that I'm going to have some cross canceling happen here. You cancel to 1, you cancel to a 3 when I multiply, and I'm going to get 5/3 for my final answer, which I will then check. Number 3, 5/3. Number 3, 5/3. 5/3, I got it right. I will highlight this in green. I didn't mean to double tap the 5/3. All right. Number 4, kind of the same thing. I'm going to first plug in -2. F of -2. I get -2 quantity squared plus 1, and that's going to be equal to 4 plus 1, which is 5. And then f of -1, I want to do this in a separate color, please. This is going to be f of -1, and that's going to be -1 quantity squared plus 1. -1 quantity squared is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, so the answer is here 2. All right, to find the slope, very quickly. The slope is the change in y. How much do we change to get from 5 to 2? We had to go down 3, so -3. And then we do the change in x's. How much do we change to get from -2 to -1? Well, we had to go up 1, so this is going to be a positive 1. The answer here is going to be -3. I'm going to box it. Let's go ahead and check our work. -3 for number 4, -3 for number 4. We got it right. Coming back over here, we're going to highlight this one in green. Highlight you in green. All right, then we do number 5. So we have, notice that the first 4 were polynomial. They're quadratic specifically, and the last 4 are going to be rational, which means they're fractions. So again, I'm going to be plugging in. Let's see what we got here. I'm going to do f of -4, and I'm going to get, this is going to be equal to negative out front, 1 over a -4 minus 2, and -4 minus 2 is a -6. Make it a negative again, and it's going to be a positive 1/6. What about f of -7/2? Fractions in here. Fractions within fractions. Let's see what happens. I have a negative out front, 1 over u, and I have a -7/2 down here, and then a -2. These are both going the same direction, and that isn't being divided by 2, so I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2. So I'm doing this out loud, but I'm going to say it. This is going to turn into a -4 over 2. -4 and then another -7 are going in the same direction is -11. So really what I have here is a negative out front, 1 over here, a -11 over 2 in the bottom, and then these two negatives are going to cancel out, so you don't have to worry about that. And then 1 over anything just means the anything gets flipped. So this anything will get flipped, and I'm going to do 2 over 11. If you're not sure why I'm doing that, it's really a keep it, change it, flip it. I will do a longer explanation for this, but in the future, if you see 1 divided by any tiny little fraction, just flip the tiny little fraction. So here's how it works. First, ignore the negatives, and I'm going to have 1, keep it, and then I'm going to change it, and then I'll flip it, and I get just 2 over 11 for my final answer, which I will then check. 5 is 2/11. 5 is not 2/11. Wow, I did make a mistake on number 5. It's 1 over 33. 5 is 1 over 33. What did we make a mistake? Oh, that was only one part of it. I need to keep going. I didn't even find the slope yet. Mr. Sindel, you're so silly. All right, so again, slope here is going to be defined as the change in y and the change in x. How much did x change? Well, it's kind of hard to do the denominator of the slope. I need to change the forward by multiplying by 2 over 2, and I now have a negative 8 over 2. If negative 8 over 2, how much did you move from negative 8 to a negative 7? Negative 8 to negative 7, I just add 1, so my change is 1/2. And that was just the bottom because these are the x coordinates up here. Then I have to do the y coordinates. The y coordinates are 2/11ths and 1/6, which are not even close to the same fraction, so I'm going to go ahead and change those right now. I'm going to multiply this one by 11 over 11 and multiply this one by 6 over 6, and I'm going to get 11 over 66, and I'm going to get 12 over 66. How much did I move to get from 1166 to 1266? You move 166. Specifically, from u to u, I add 1 over 66. So 1 over 66. And then I'm going to keep it, change it, flip it in here. I'm going to get 1 over 66. Keep it, change it, flip it. And this is going to be 2 over 66, which is 1 over 33, which I memorized from the answer key is correct. Therefore, I will highlight this in green. Give me a sec here. I have a text message on my phone, and I want to make sure this is not important. Nothing too pressing. All right. I'm moving on to number 6. Kind of the same thing. I think this one's going to be a little bit easier though. We have f of negative 1, which is going to be 1 over negative 1 plus 2, which is going to be 1 over 1, which is just 1. Second color here. F of 0 is going to be 1 over 0 plus 2. 0 plus 2 is 2. 1 over 2 is 1/2. All right. So how much should we move? Let's identify slope here. Slope. The slope here is going to be the change in y. The change in y is 1 to 1/2, which means I went down 1/2. And then, so I went from 1 to 1/2, right? That means I went down 1/2. And then from negative 1 to 0, I had to go up 1, so that's just going to be up 1. And this is just negative 1/2. Anything divided by 1 is itself, so you kind of ignore the bottom, right? Let's check. Negative 1/2 for number 6. Number 6, negative 1/2, negative 1/2. Excellent. And then I come back over here. I highlight that one in green. All right. Moving fast. Here we go. Number 7. Ooh, this looks nice and easy. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, I hope. F of 2 is going to be equal to negative 1 over 2. Done. F of 5 is going to be equal to negative 1 over 5. Done. All right. Our slope is going to be the change in y. So how much should we change? A little bit hard to see, but I can multiply this one by 5 over 5, multiply this one by 2 over 2, so I can see the change here. It's going to be negative 5 over 10. This one's going to be negative 2 over 10. I went from u to u, which means I had to go up 3 to get to negative 2. So I went up 3/10. So I went up 3/10. And then my change in x to get from 2 to 5 was I went up 3. I went up 3. So I'm going to keep it, change it, flip it, keep it, change it. Technically it's over 1, right? So I flip it and it's going to be 1/3. And then notice you're going to have some cross canceling, cross, and this is going to be 1/10 for our slope. And I box it. 1/10 for number 7, 1/10 for number 7, and 1/10 for number 7. I got it right. I can highlight in green. Hooray. All right. Highlight it in green, 1/10. And then I do number 8. And this one does not look fun. It's fractions within fractions, so that usually means we're in for a bad time. Let's go. All right. I have f of 1, which is an easy problem. It's 1 over 1 plus 1, which is 1 over 2, or 1/2. F of 3/2, different color. F of 3/2 is a little bit more tricky. It's going to be 1 over 3/2 plus 1. 3/2 plus 1 is a little bit hard, so I'm going to change this to 2 over 2. That's going to change to 2 over 2. So 2 over 2 plus 3 over 2 is 5 over 2. So I'm going to get 1 over 5 over 2. And again, remember that rule. 1 over anything is just the flipping of the anything, which is equal to 2/5. All right, so I'm going to start analyzing slope now. Slope is the change of y and the change of x. So the change in y of these changes is hard to do because they don't have the same denominator. So let's make them the same denominator. Multiply by 5 over 5, and I get 5 over 10. Multiply this one by 2 over 2, and I get 4 over 10. How much did I move to get from 5 over 10 to 4 over 10? I had to go down 1/10. So my slope went down 1/10. And then to the right, how much? I went from 1 to 3/2, which really is 2 over 2 to 3/2. I went up 1/2 to get from 2 to 3. So I went up 1/2. Up 1/2 is a positive 1/2. All right, this is going to be a keep it, change it, flip it, keep it, change it, flip it, cross cancel, u and u, 1 and 5, and I get negative 1/5 for my final answer, which I will then box. Number 8 is negative 1/5. Eight is negative 1/5. 8 is negative 1/5. First half of the homework problems are now done, and we got 100% so far. We haven't made a single mistake. Mistakes are coming, I promise. They always happen, right? All right, so we're trying to find the secant line, and they give us both the x and y coordinates. So it's kind of funny on each of these, you don't really need the function. So on every single one of these, I'm essentially scribbling out the function, and I just pay attention to the x and y coordinates. Remember, it's going to be x1, y1, x2, y2, and you're just trying to find slope. So it's a two-step problem. First, we're going to find slope, then we're going to find the y-intercept, and then we'll be done. So step one, slope. How much should we change? And again, I'm going to use that fast method of it's going to be change in y over the change in x. How much did I change in the y's? Essentially, I'm asking, how do I get from 1 to 2? You went up 1. Done. How do you get from -1 to -1/2? You go up +1/2. So I'm going to go up +1/2. To get from u to u, I go up +1/2. I'm going to keep it, change it, flip it, and I get 2 for the slope. That's how fast these can go. And then for the y-intercept, 2 for the y-intercept, I essentially have to do some solving. So I have to say y equals mx plus b, plug in what we know. We know that m is 2. We know that b we don't know. And we do know the y and x because it told us up here y is 1, x is -1. I could use a fraction 1, but I prefer not to use fractions. So if the y is 1, this y is also 1. So I come down here and say 1. And if the x is -1, this x is also -1. I say -1. And I just solve. 2 times -1 is -2 plus b. And then I add 2 to both sides, and I get 3 is equal to b, and I put this entire equation down beneath with m and b plugged in. So y is equal to m, which we got was 2, x plus b, and b is 3, so 2x plus 3. Let's check. Number 9, 2x plus 3. Number 9 is indeed 2x plus 3. There it is. And I can highlight that one in green. All right, in number 10, again, you kind of ignore the equation and you just think about slope. So here I go. The slope is the change in y. How much did I change to get from 3 to 2? I had to go down 1. How much do I change to get from -1 to 0? I have to go up 1. So the slope here is -1. Okay, now I'm going to do the y-intercept. And the way that you do that is filling into our equation, which I'm going to go even faster this time. And pro tip, the definition of a y-intercept is where x is equal to 0. That is the definition. I shouldn't box it. It's like super duper important for you to know that because check it out. X is already 0 here, which means that is the y-intercept, and we're done. So the y-intercept is, I can just say b is equal to 2 because I know the definition of a y-intercept. And I can immediately jump down and say y is equal to -1x, or just -x, plus b plus 2. So the final answer is -x plus 2. Y equals -x plus 2. Y equals -x plus 2 is indeed the correct answer for number 10, and I can go ahead and highlight that one in green. I hope you're learning a bunch of tricks from this video. I know I'm going fast, but I want to be done with this homework in a reasonable amount of time. All right. Again, there's unfortunately no y, and oops, I didn't mean to do that. There's no y-intercept down here because none of these are 0, but check it out over here. Oh, dang, that's a y of 0. Do any of these have any more free y-intercepts? Free y-intercept right there. No. Free y-intercept right there. Some of these have free y-intercepts, some of them don't. You should know when those are. All right, so again, I'm going to be starting here with slope. Ignore the equation, doesn't even matter for these types of problems. The slope is the change in y, so 2 to 5 is a +3. How much did we change from 1 to 2? We went up 1. The slope here is 3. The y-intercept, we have to do a little bit of math to solve, and here we go. It's going to be y. I'm going to randomly choose this point. So the y is 2. Y equals m, and then x is 1 plus b. Again, I'm plugging into y equals mx plus b, but I'm going to stop writing out y equals mx plus b. You guys have that memorized. I'm just writing it out as I plug it in. 3 times 1 is 3. If I subtract 3 from both sides, I get -1 for b. And therefore, my answer here is y equals m, which is 3x plus 1, or sorry, plus b, which is -1. So I get y equals 3x minus 1. Let's check. Number 11, 3x minus 1. 3x minus 1 for number 11. We have it correct. And we can highlight, and then we can move forward. All right, number 12. Again, we're going to start with slope. Oop, that is not a pen. We start with the slope. The slope is the change in y. How much did we change from 3 to 0? We had to go down 3. How much did we change to go from -2 to 1? We had to go up 3. The slope here is going to be -1. All right, now we need to do our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is going to be y equals mx plus b. I'm going to choose this point because it has a 0 in it, and therefore it's probably going to be easier. Y is 0 equals m, which is -1, times x, which is 1 in this case, plus b. And -1 times 1 is -1. Add the 1 to both sides, and I get 1 is equal to b. Therefore, my final answer is y equals -1x, or just -x, plus b, which is plus 1. So let's see. Y equals -x plus 1. Y equals -x plus 1. -x plus 1. Indeed, I have it. So I can go ahead and highlight you in green. And moving on to number 13. What do we got here? free y-intercept, but gross fractions and fractions within fractions. What have you done to me, Mr. Sindel? All right, here we go. Again, ignore the equation. Never really needed it anyway. All right, it's a little bit harder of a question to say, how do we get from the y to the y? Because I'm gonna have to change the -1 into a -4/4, and now I can ask, how do I get from -4 to -3? Well, I had to go up 1. So my slope here that I'm working on, I should be annotating that. My slope, I had to go up 1/4. So I'm gonna say up 1/4, and then how do I get change in my y's? My y's went, let me do this in red. My y's went from 0 to 1/3, which means I had to go up 1/3. I'm going to keep it, change it, flip it, and I get 3/4 for my slope. How do I find my y-intercept? I got a free one, because whenever you have x is equal to 0, that is the y-intercept. So I can just come down here and say that b is equal to -1 in this case, because this -1 came from right there. So I can go ahead and write my final equation. Y equals mx, so 3/4 x plus b, so -1. Let's check. Y equals 3/4 x minus 1. Y equals 3/4 x minus 1. Good job, Mr. Sindel. Oh, I'm really close to being done, aren't I? All right, number 14. No free y-intercept, sad face, and a lot of fractions, another sad face. So I already know that I'm going to be changing from u to u and from u to u, so I might as well make sure that they have matching fractions. So let me go ahead and rewrite this first point. This first point is really going to be -2/2. Notice how this 2 and this 2 matches, and it's the same number. And then it's going to be comma, +3/3, and notice that this matches the denominator here, so it's really easy for me to ask the question, how do our y's change? So the y changes from 3/3 to 2/3, which means our slope, we always start with our change in y. The y changed by going down 1/3. So down 1/3 is a -1/3, and then the change in x, we change from -2/2 to -1/2, which means we went up 1/2. So we went up 1/2, a positive 1/2, and then I'm going to keep it, change it, flip it, and notice that there's some cross canceling here, and I get a -1. All right, so in this case, you do unfortunately have to solve. So let me go ahead and write y equals mx plus b. Oh, I'm not going to write y. The y coordinate is, we already know, we're going to choose the one without fractions. So the y coordinate is that y right there. Y, which is 1, equals m, which we just found is -1, x, which we know is -1 from the point up above, plus b. And we can see -1 times -1 is +1. We're going to subtract 1 from both sides. And 0 is equal to b, which means I don't have to write it. And my equation is y equals -1x, or -x, if I simplify that. So y equals -x for number 14. Number 14, where are you? No! Sad face. I got my first problem wrong. My streak is broken. And why on earth did I write a 2 here? I wrote keep it, and I wrote a 3, and I kept it a 2. What? That's whatever. I'm going to erase you and try you again. All right, probably no cross canceling. Let's get rid of you. All right, so I'm going to highlight my mistake in a sec, but let me go ahead and write this out. So it was -1/3, and then 2, and this is going to be -2/3, and unfortunately that means it's harder to solve problem. So unfortunately I have to highlight you because I made a mistake right there, and I'm going to continue on with the process. So continuing on with the process, it's going to be y, which we know from above is 1, equals m, which we know is -2/3, x, which we know is -1, plus b. Y equals mx plus b, right? A negative times a negative is a positive, so this is just +2/3, and we subtract 2/3, and we get 1/3 on this side is equal to b. And I can write my final equation, which is y equals m, which is -2/3, x plus b, which is +1/3. I totally forgot what our answer was. Let's go check. -2/3 x plus 1/3, -2/3 x plus 1/3. Whew, we did get that one right. We had a tiny mistake. Is that the only mistake I'll make this lesson? I don't know. That should all be highlighted in green. All right. Number 15. Here we go. No free y-intercept, sad face. Let's go ahead and make sure that our fraction is nice and ready to go. So I'm going to change our -2 to a -4/2, and I'm going to change the 1 to a 3/3, and now our fractions match up. So this 2 matches with that 2, this 3 matches with that 3, and I just converted these numbers correctly. I don't think I need to explain that. You guys are in pre-calculus. You guys are smart. So to move from our y's, to get from our +3/3 to 2/3, I had to go down 1/3. So our slope here is going to go down 1/3, so I'm going to get -1/3, and then the change in x, I was at -4/2, and I have to go to -3/2. That means I had to go up 1/2, so up 1/2. Keep it, change it, flip it. This is going to be keep it. I kept it this time. I changed it. I flipped it this time. Flipped it. Okay, I'm going to flip it correctly this time. -2/3, and I'm ready to find the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept, the way that you do that is you write y, which y do we want? We're going to use this point because it's nice. So this y, which is 1, y equals m, which we just found is negative 2/3, x, remember that this is our x that we're bringing down here, it's going to be negative 2, y equals mx plus b. We don't know what the b is, so we're just going to say plus b. Notice that this is going to be 4/3 over here, plus b, and I'm going to swap out our 1 for a 3/3 because it'll be a little bit easier to do our subtraction. All right, so I need to subtract 4/3 on each side. 3 minus 4 is a negative 1, so this is a negative 1/3 on this side is equal to our b. From there, I'm going to write our final equation. Y equals m. M is negative 2/3, negative 2/3 x plus b, which is minus 1/3. Final answer in box it, negative 2/3 x minus 1/3. Negative 2/3 x minus 1/3. We got it correct. So we're going to come down here and highlight you. All right. And number 16, yay, we finally got a free y-intercept. It's about time. Let's go ahead and make sure that these fractions match up. Those fractions are good. These fractions are not. We have to change both of these. All right, here we go. We're going to change this fraction into 0, comma, I'm going to multiply that by 9 and 9, multiply you by 2 and 2. So our fraction over here is negative 9 over 18. And over here we get still a quarter, comma, and this is going to be negative 8 over 18. Okay, so we have the same denominator here and here, so it should be an easy question as to how much we're increasing or decreasing. So let's go ahead and work on our slope. Our slope definition is the change in y. How much do we change in y? Well, we have the same denominator. To get from negative 9 to negative 8, we have to add 1. So we're going to add 1/18th. 1/18th. That's a change in y. The change in x, how do we get from 0 to 1/4, which I'm going to draw in blue? We have to add 1/4, so positive 1/4. Keep it. Change it. Flip it. It's going to be 4 over 18, which is 2 over 9. All right, so to find the y-intercept, you don't have to do anything because it gave it to us. The y-intercept is negative 1/2. B is equal to negative 1/2. Why is that? Because this number came from you, sir, or madame, which means our final answer is y equals m, which is 2/9 x, plus b, which is minus 1/2. So let's check. Y equals 2/9 x minus 1/2. 2/9 x minus 1/2. We got it correct. We only made that one tiny little mistake in, what problem was that? In number 14. If you caught that before I did, then you can log the extra credit. I talked fast, so it's going to be hard to catch it before I do. That concludes the homework for AP Precalculus. What was this? This was homework 1-4. Thanks for watching.